Great. So my name is Anthony Smith. I'm a manager from our service planning group within the recently moved into the operations and safety group, formerly in the planning and development group. And I'm joined by Jeremy Finkelman, senior planner from WSP Canada, who was our consultant who led the work on this project. So the outline for today is just to give you a little bit of the background on something we call the GAME tool, the Geospatial Accessibility Mapping for Equity tool. We're going to walk you through the approach, the technical side. This is not a technical workshop, so we want to just cover the very high-level notes, and happy to talk to you afterwards or share some details by email. We're going to go through some results and the exciting kind of visualizations of these data. That's really my passion, is the cartography and the data visualization side. And then talk about how some of these results have impacted our findings at Metrolinx. In particular, my work is on the long-range 10-year GO-Bus strategy. So mapping out the future evolution of the GO-Bus network and then evaluating both the trends over time as we make incremental changes and looking forward and trying to forecast the impacts of these larger network changes on the total population in terms of how people get to and from the places they want to go, as well as the equity-seeking groups that we're trying to provide some additional support for. Finally, we'll talk about some key takeaways and then hopefully have a few questions. So I'll hand it over to Jeremy to get us started.
Thanks so much, Anthony. So to just sort of walk us through the overarching objectives and rationale here before we get into a discussion of the results. Our overall objective here is to deliver a practical approach to measure the accessibility and equity impacts of transit projects that can be completed in-house using standard GIS software. And really the key to this is to develop a fast, nimble, easy to understand approach that allows us to visualize and understand the impacts to equity of transit specifically in relation to the access that a transit system or a series of transit systems provide. In order to do this, our approach uses GTFS data to assess the impact of proposed transit network projects. We first start by taking a look at the current network using GTFS. And, using GTFS as an input allows for a lot of flexibility. It allows us to be able to evaluate the transit network in any period of operation. We're not restricted to the peak periods, and as such, we can really focus in on particular time periods and also particular elements of the systems, which we will be describing later. We take a look at the current network, understand what the access to various opportunities, which can be defined very, very broadly, is. And then we make changes to the GTFS by developing Pseudo-GTFS and then ultimately test that future network to understand the changes in overall access. The alterations to the GTFS can be done on an ad hoc basis or brought in from EMME. So it can be done to test long-range transportation plans like 25-year networks versus current networks, or it can be run simply to assess minor service changes and the impacts of those minor service changes. Just a quick visual description of the process here, and as Anthony says, we'll be happy to answer further questions on technical aspects later or in private conversation. What the tool does is we determine the access from each origin site, and those origins can be defined in any way. We use census DAs for our input, which are the smallest census unit. But equally, we could use traffic area zones from a travel demand model or larger census units, or any type of spatial geography in order to assess access. We do that for the existing system, then we do that for the proposed system. We calculate the percentage change in accessible locations, and then we simply report that out. I'm going to go ahead and skip this slide here because this is largely what I described in the previous slide. Anthony.
Great. So that's the first half of the process, is mapping and measuring the accessibility, and then the second half, more the equity impact evaluation, is effectively calculating an index score, which is how we can then filter the population and define neighborhoods that are equity seeking as opposed to the general population, which is the broad region as a whole. And by measuring the impacts of the changes to both those specific areas, comparing it to the change overall, we can evaluate those two deltas and see if the equity-seeking groups are getting relatively better or worse off compared to the general population. I'm not going to get into the details of exactly how those equity groups are measured. Stephen Farber's here, he's an expert on this topic. We rely on the census methodology, which was developed by Statistics Canada. It's using census data, and it combines several factors of material deprivation, ethnic concentration, dependency, and residential instability. So these are factors developed by the census. We took those data, combined them at the dissemination area level, and essentially there's a series of filters applied based on different thresholds in the data. And at the end, there's an index. That's, once we calculate that index, we define the equity-seeking groups as being above a measure of 3.5 out of 5. And then that becomes an overlay, if you will, which we can then filter the results of our equity analysis. And then that data is eventually kind of mapped out across the region, and we can compare the changes, which I'll show you in some following slides. So really the exciting part and what we wanted to share is some more examples of the visualization. So we've picked a few case studies. Again, this is a very nimble, diverse tool we can apply to multiple scenarios. First off is kind of the main question that we wanted to look at is impacts of the total change in the region as a whole, both today and then 2041. So this is inputting the future network from a EMME model and then comparing it to today's network. Secondarily, we're going to look at existing network and comparing the mapping access to retail rather than access to jobs. Sometimes this is more of like the discretionary trips or non-work trips. Third, we're going to look at access to jobs, but comparing different underlying networks. So with the YRT or York Region network, and then adding in the Go Rail and bus network to show the difference of having those two connected networks, what that makes, or what the impact to customers would be. And then fourth, we're going to look at the post-secondary institution destinations and the impact of changes to the Go Bus network and how that would impact the customer base and their ability to get to and from schools. So there's a lot of technical things, but we're going to just show it more visually. And Jeremy will get us started.
Thanks, Anthony. As mentioned, really the power of this tool is that it can be used to demonstrate results very quickly within a matter of days, as opposed to in a matter of months. And it can be used in a very nimble way to demonstrate access to opportunities as the user wants to define them. Obviously, the most traditional opportunity that we typically use when we talk about transportation is access to jobs, and I'll talk about that in a second. But and we do try to illustrate this in our examples. That, you know, instead of using access to jobs, we could be using access to any other points-based opportunity as the user wants to define it. Post-secondary institutions, retail stores, whatever it may be, in whatever time period we would like to assess the network in. So to discuss this, here's some more of a traditional evaluation to get us started. The first evaluation looks at the tool's application in measuring access to jobs in the AM peak. The map demonstrates jobs accessible by transit in the AM peak period within a 60-minute travel time as a function of walking access, transit travel time, and transit frequency. The present network is assessed. Unsurprisingly, the City of Toronto affords residents the greatest access to jobs via the transit system, with most of the city being able to access over 1.1 million jobs within 60 minutes. Notably, transit access is strongest near major employment centers and along the width and breadth of subway lines. Relative gaps are noted in Scarborough, however, which is very, very clearly shown, I think, here. Outside Toronto, Mississauga, Brampton, and a swath of areas in southern York region, significantly fewer jobs are accessible via transit in the AM peak. So again, this is a quick graphic to show the effectiveness, really, of the transit system in the AM peak at accessing jobs. As we move forward to the 2041 network, the same analysis is conducted on existing demographics. The only thing that we've changed out here is the network itself. By 2041, as we know, major projects such as Eglinton Crosstown, Eglinton West, Finch West, Ontario Line, the Yonge North Subway Extension, Huron-Ontario LRT, and GO Expansion will significantly expand the accessibility shed of public transit. The post-construction impact of these projects on job accessibility by transit in the AM peak is displayed here in this image. The following image, which I'll show now, displays the spatial impacts of the region's multi-billion-dollar transit improvement investments in terms of change in access to jobs. And this is what we're showing here in this one here. Ultimately, the new network will radically transform transit access across the core GGH, significantly expanding the public's access to jobs and services, with clear benefits shown along all improvement corridors such as Huron-Ontario, Eglinton Avenue, Finch West, and along Highway 7 and Brampton's Queen Street, as well as into Scarborough. Altogether, and these are the summary statistics that we're showing in the top right, 27% more jobs will be accessible within a 60-minute transit travel time network-wide. So this is the difference between the 2041 network and today's existing network. Again, there's been no changes to the underlying demographics. This is pure network improvements. We also ran our equity screen on this. And when we take a look at it and we filter for equity-seeking areas, altogether 31% more jobs will be accessible from equity-seeking areas, meaning that the 2041 network, as it relates to equity-seeking areas, performs better or provides more opportunities than it does to the population as a whole. A good news story. But while trips to work at traditional peak periods are vital, shifts in work schedules and post-pandemic shifts to hybrid work or work from home have altered the parameters of transit planning. Increasingly, many jurisdictions are seeing a rise in midday trips with a general flattening of peak demands. This means a successful transit system increasingly needs to be designed to be convenient for all trips, not just peak commutes. We've leveraged our tool here to map out transit access to retail locations within 30 minutes between 1 and 1:30 p.m. Again, the tool is very flexible, so we wanted to sort of demonstrate that here. So here we're showing that for the current network. As displayed, the reach of transit to shopping opportunities shows a strong relationship with the subway and frequent bus network in both Toronto and Mississauga. Similarly, the same tool can be used to visualize and analyze impacts of service changes to access to other points-based opportunities such as grocery stores, schools, hospitals, or post-secondary institutions at any period of the day or night, to ensure services are being best designed around the people they need to serve in all facets of their lives. Like the jobs example displayed earlier, layering equity-related data or comparing two scenarios will note how network changes impact equity-seeking groups in relation to the population at large. Anthony.
Great. For a third example, we wanted to compare, instead of changes over time, just changes to different opportunities to access the transit network. So, for example, this is York Region, the existing transit network using just the existing board period. So if you're a customer paying a York Region fare, this is where you can travel within, I believe this is 60 minutes in the AM peak period. However, due to the One Fare program and fare integration across the region, we now offer a free transfer for these customers within a 2-hour transfer window, meaning you can easily connect to the GO Transit bus or rail network. And this is now the increase in transit accessibility for those customers. So you can now get to downtown, a significant increase at the same fare. So this is another example of being able to test different scenarios and ultimately combine different combinations of service offerings. And the fourth example we'd like to share is because GoBus is a very, students make up a very high percentage of the GoBus network, approximately 25% of our customers on the bus network, compared to the rail network, which they only make up about 3%. So demographic of students is very important, so we wanted to sort of test the impact of travel to post-secondary institutions. Now, what I'm just showing you here for simplicity is the delta, that change map, from the existing network to the future network. And you'll notice there is quite a bit of red, which is bad. So due to the bus network itself being aligned to leverage the improvements to the rapid transit and GO expansion program, when we look at the bus network individually, it does actually reduce accessibility. And I'm just simply saying this to highlight that we need to be very careful in interpreting results of the tool. If we look at the bus network in isolation, it looks like things are getting worse. But we need to continue to consider the impact. For example, in that Durham area, there will be 15-minute GO rail expansion, and the Durham-Scarborough BRT is a planned project. So we'll be looking at that to offset the reductions in GO bus service. So good news story overall, but if you look at this in isolation, it could be misleading. So in just the last minute here, just want to summarize. This is a simple tool. I know there's a lot of advanced methods out there using very advanced programming and statistical methods. This is meant to be simple as a desktop user using ArcGIS Pro. I'm not able to always hire a consultant or go do a study for these types of tests. I want to be able to do it quickly as opportunities come up. So really it's able to look at any time period, evaluate small route modifications or system changes as a whole, and in the end, it's a fast tool that allows us to test and iterate and learn from these different data sets as we're developing service plans. And at the end of the day, it's a simple tool that's easy to communicate, and therefore it's not something that's intimidating for the public to understand. It's just percentage change over time and very simple visual maps that indicate the network coverage. So with that, happy to take questions at the end, but thank you very much and look forward to the discussion.